Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our AI in Action series, where leading minds in AI from across the world share their story, success, and advice. AI in Action cuts through the hype and explores the true impact of artificial intelligence in our world today.
Welcome to another Alldus podcast. I've got Simon Collins, who's Head of Security and Resilience at Allianz Global Investors. Simon, thanks very much for coming into the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Simon, for people that don't know yourself or haven't heard about your experience, would you mind giving us a brief overview about your world in the world of AI, cyber, governance, risk, all those different things and the different roles you've had?
Yeah, so I started in IT quite a long time ago with a guy called Larry from Wicklow running cables, and the whole way up through school and college. I started in transition year and lots of different hands-on IT roles. Then moved across to more of a security role in consulting for several years and really focused on investigations, forensics, dealing with people when things went wrong. Yeah. So did a lot of work in the e-discovery world in the early stages, did practice guides, international standards, and then kind of pivoted to working in cybersecurity, again consulting, where you're trying to help people not get in trouble in the first place. And then after a few years there, I decided to jump into a role, a more in-house role, to help really build out security and resilience capability where I am now.
When you think about going back, did that really shape the role that you're in now in terms of having such a broad understanding from a variety of different angles? You've worked in regular organizations, consulting firms, you've had these different kind of fingers in different types of pies.
Yeah, I think it helps gives you a good perspective. I think what's quite useful, I think probably the skill that I brought up all along, might be a test of it today, was explaining complicated technical issues. And like that started when you're being cross-examined for the first time in court as an expert witness. You really have to explain. I remember sitting there in a panel and saying to the judge, have you searched with Google before? And he said, I don't have a computer. And I said, well, how do you explain this using analogy of a library and books that deleted and how you can recover, all this type of stuff. So that ability to explain and story tell in a way, while still sticking to the facts, because you're also dealing with highly technical people as well, who, if you story tell too much, they can say, well, no, that's actually not a great analogy.
Yeah.
So I think that really helped. I think when you get into then the commercial world of having that experience, I was able to explain a lot of these risk concepts to senior stakeholders where you're looking at pretty big ticket investments to solve these problems. And I had a manager before who said, well, it doesn't make the boat go any faster, Simon, yet we have to spend it. You're saying, yeah, but if we hit an iceberg, we'll survive. So you're really trying to use different storytelling and analogies to bring the messages across, but really ground it in. I think a lot of people that I talk to nowadays, particularly if we're looking to purchase a service or a product, I'd go, exactly how does that work? Right down to the code, please. I want to understand. So it's trying to bridging that gap. And where I am now, I find I'm starting to, we've teams of great people who really get into the technical details. And I love being able to dip back into it. But I spend more time obviously explaining things now and managing than the detail. But I still get to do it from time to time, which is good fun.
We're in this kind of interesting world where we've got frontier AI models that are so powerful sometimes you can't even get access to, depending on who you speak to in the world. Is this a new threat landscape? Is this something we've seen before? Is it just fancy marketing?
It's interesting you say that. So you go between the fancy marketing, it's no big deal, and on the other side, doomsday, everything is gone, we have to start again. Yeah. And I was reflecting as I was traveling here, like, a big part of my job is to, like, if you're running a crisis and you're dealing with these type of things, and it's like, as you know, I deal with the physical security side of things as well. We won't touch on that today, but sometimes it is literally life and death. Not very often, thankfully. So you have to be calm, you have to be balanced. So in this, it's somewhere in between. The way I describe it, and we can get into a bit of detail on what it is, but I'd look at it as, for most organizations who are relatively well set up and weathering the storms that we've had, normal cyber attackers the last several years, mostly regulatory compliant, this is an adaptation or a step change in responding to a defense or responding to a new type of attack. It's not starting again. So the way we kind of look at it is that you've got a new type of phishing email. So they used to put the words in an email and text. Then they put the words in an image that they put in the email. And we had to adjust our tools to adapt to those new type of technical attacks.
Yeah.
This is bigger than that, but we don't need to start again. So, and I think it's trying to having that calm, balanced view in the middle of saying what do we need to do.
Yeah, because you kind of get the opinion you do need to start again with the way it's labelled and how everything's dramatically changed as well, and the basics aren't no longer the basics.
Yeah, well, maybe I think I would have a different view, because where we look at it, if we maybe frame this specific, like with the frontier models and particularly around exploiting vulnerabilities. I'll explain what vulnerabilities maybe for a bit of background in a moment. However, exploiting a vulnerability is the first step in an attack lifecycle.
Yeah.
And most in the industry, we map it along a 10-step kill chain, it's called, because if you kill the attack at any step along the way, the earlier you kill it, the better.
Yeah.
Typically, what we're talking about here is these models that can exploit vulnerabilities much faster than before. It's typically step 1. We've still got 9 more steps. And we have, you hear defense in depth, layered controls. We've layers of controls at every step along the way. So yes, 1, and people might say, well, 1, 2, or 3, but a subset of the overall picture has changed.
Yeah.
But let's not throw out all the other good stuff that we have there.
Yeah.
The fact that if we think of it, and maybe it might be helpful to explain vulnerabilities, a vulnerability being a weakness in a people, process, or technology that if it's exploited leads to unintended consequences.
Yeah.
Now look, when we're talking cyber attackers, we're talking about the bad guys. So that means like stealing data, getting access to a system and shutting it down, so prevent us from doing business. So nice simple vulnerability is phishing email, human vulnerability. We convince you to click the link.
Yep.
You click the link, the bad guys get access to your computer. We tackle that by training and awareness, phishing exercises so that you know, don't click the link. Lots of technical stuff in the background that stops it getting to you in the first place. And if you do click the link, we can block it as well.
Yeah.
But those are the types of human vulnerabilities we're talking about. So for these frontier AI models, they're particularly good at exploiting technical vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
Now, technical vulnerabilities are essentially in every piece of software code ever written. They're only an issue when someone finds them. And actually, they're only an issue if someone finds them and someone exploits them. So what typically happens is that a software vendor, commercial vendor, releases a piece of software. On day 1, they believe it's perfectly good and secure. They've done their testing. Security researchers, and there's 2 types of them. So typically, I'll call it the good security researchers. They go out and they test the software and they find ways to break into it. They find a vulnerability and they find a way to get into the system. They tell the software provider, who pays them a fee. That's how they make their money. So we call them good security researchers. Software provider produces a patch. And the first thing we know that there's a problem with the software is that there's a patch available. And so we find out on the same day as the bad guys do. So while we're racing to apply the patch, they're racing to reverse engineer the patch to understand why it exists, what vulnerability it's fixing,
Yeah.
and how they can then exploit that vulnerability. And that typically takes 30, 60, 90 days.
Yeah.
So we have time to patch before it is like exploitable, they say, in the wild, that anyone could get a software tool and hack in. So that's why we have time, and every organization has a routine patching cycle. They patch every month. For the majority, that's fine. You have the other situation where the not so friendly researchers find the vulnerability and they sell it to some bad guys who start using it. So the first we find out about a vulnerability, they call it a 0 day, which is often a misused term. The 0 day is really what it's saying is that it's been exploited out there, usually by a small number of very sophisticated nation-state attackers. Because to get the vulnerability that nobody knows about, you've got to pay, and you've got to pay big, typically in the millions. So your average cyber criminal doesn't have this. But it's been exploited, and it's typically used on very high-value targets. What happens then is that we find out about it. We have 0 days to patch it because we're already exposed. It's already out there. So that whole vulnerability life cycle is something that happens very routinely. It's a huge organization thing. You see on your iPhone tells you patch it. In the background, if you've got 20,000 hosts that you need to patch, you're patching it continuously. The step change, and I think that's the argument as to how big a step change it is that when you have one of these AI models, they're really good at preparing speeches. They're really good at fixing your PowerPoint, creating content. They're really good at coding. And like, you can use natural language, say, hey, write me code to fix this website or to do this. The big step change now is that they're also good at finding vulnerabilities, writing exploits for those vulnerabilities, and running them. And sometimes they'll chain 3 or 4 vulnerabilities together to actually get from step to actually get right into the system. And that's what's coming out now. That's what's coming down the line. But it's still exploiting vulnerability at speed, at pace.
Yeah.
But that's what's different about them. And that's why it has people quite worried.
At Alldus, we're helping companies hire professionals in the field of cybersecurity and AI on permanent and contract. And our differentiator is we're helping companies hire people that we really trust. And we build that trust through referrals. Over 85% of the people that we place into roles on contract or permanent are through referrals, or people we know who recommend them. This is really important, particularly in the world of cyber, where you want to have professionals who are really good at their job, who are trusted, and they can come in and add value to your business. On contract, we've got some of the most niche skills available for people to hire, but also we're introducing virtual CISOs. CISOs that can come in and work in your business between 1, 2, 3, 4 days a month, if not a little bit more. If you're interested in finding out a little bit more about the services Alldus provide, please feel free to get in touch. Now back to the show. It did feel like significant, right, where so many different types of people are talking about it, leaders and things like that as well, which I think is great for the security industry in general, just to actually a kind of wider awareness. What can be done about this? And is this like one clean-up exercise where you clean it up, you're done, or is this going to be kind of ongoing?
So it's both. What can be done, and the way I think most organizations so obviously I connect with all of our peers, trying to figure out what's going on, making sure everyone's we're at least on the right track. And the general consensus seems to be is that there is that cleanup exercise. The way I describe it is that before we had to be good at the basics, now we must be excellent at the basics. So that falls into kind of 3.5 things that I think need to be done. One is patching. So the majority of software most companies use is provided by commercial vendors. You name all the big names, you know them. They are currently getting early access to these tools. They're running them, they're finding vulnerabilities, and they will have in the coming weeks and months, and my prediction is the rest of this year into next year, floods of patches. And some of those patches will be for some very serious vulnerabilities. So you might, in extreme cases, go, we need to turn off the system off the internet because it's too dangerous to leave it there until we can patch it. Yeah. Like I've had that twice in my last 8 years. So it's very rare. I suspect that's going to happen a lot more. Yeah. So what we have to do is that we have to be absolutely brilliant at patching fast. I think the average I read the other day was 55 days is the mean time to patch for vulnerabilities. That needs to be down to closer to 15 or 20. Really efficient. So I think a lot of organizations now are saying, well, how can we patch faster when our commercial vendors give us patches, and what risks are we willing to take? Maybe we can break things from time to time. The second piece, so that's something we already do, we just got to get better. The second piece that we already do, and I say we generally, the industry, these are the basics, is code we develop ourselves, the software code. So no external vendors are going to give us patches for that because it's ours, we wrote it. Yeah. So we need to go and make sure all of that code is centrally managed in these repositories, and that use software scanning tools. Use the scanning tools, close all the vulnerabilities you have, clean any backlogs, even the medium stuff that you didn't think was important before, clear the decks. And it's like clear the decks for the storm before it comes. So make sure you're doing all of those basics right. Things like a lot of organizations would say, well, we're going to block software going into production that has critical and high vulnerabilities, but we might let medium ones through. Well, don't let medium through anymore. Block them as well. Get really good at the basics. So that's stuff that we're doing. That's the just get faster and better at what we're already doing, a bit more focus on it. Where it gets into a bit more of the step change is on, maybe if we stick with the software, self-developed code for a moment, we need to get these AI tools. So yes, they're being given in these different projects to some of the big vendors, but when they're available for us, we need to get them and run them on our code and use them. And what's really interesting about some of the capability, and some of it's already there, whereby it can find the vulnerability, it can write the exploit, it can write the remediation code, it can fix the vulnerability, and it can put it into your testing environment, say, hey, I found this problem, I fixed it, run through your testing and put it into production. In some organizations that aren't highly regulated, they might go, do you know what, it's actually better than us, so we'll let it just put it into production, because the consequences of it getting wrong is no big deal, we can roll it back. So let's not wait till the developer wakes up the next morning, let's them wake up and go, hey, I fixed your code overnight and it's in production. So I think adopting those tools at scale and that's more of a step change for people to really get into mindset. We're going to allow this to...
Because this really feels like a brave new, like this is a new world, right?
To an extent. We already have for several years now AI that can write code, hundreds and thousands of people using it. So I say it's a step change, not fundamentally. Now, a lot of people aren't using it. And
yes.
They need to...
Do you know what I mean by that, actually? It's an awareness.
Yeah.
To say, because I regularly talk to people who are software developers who are 30 to 600 times more productive. They talk about in their coding and programming. But I also remind them to say that you're actually only spending 20% of your day doing those different tasks. You still have to do everything else, which you aren't X amount more productive. But still, a significant amount of software developers or people aren't actually using these tools in their day-to-day work.
Yeah. And if you get like big organizations that have been around for a long time using older systems, older types of code, and it might be the same developers for 10, 20, 30 years maintaining that system, like that's a big ask to get them to adopt these new tools and change. So I think that's really key. I think they will have to. So this is one of the things where it's about that adjustment, that change, but pushing it through, getting people on board with it. And for me, I know personally, I led our DORA efforts for 3 years. So I was a little bit late to the table when it came to actually properly getting hands-on into some of the AI tools. And even just using it so much in personal capacity, really getting used to it, so that when you bring it into your commercial capacity and in your work, it's not so scary. You've got experience. So there's a lot of work to be done around that. And getting these tools in place, using the ones that are already available. I think the third area of those kind of 3.5 areas is the defenders. I had mentioned you've got your 10-step kill chain, your 24/7 security operations, your detection response. We can use all of these tools there as well. Now, it's been out for years at different levels. I expect a big step up now with the latest models. But when the big security vendors say, well, here's the AI agent, that means you don't have to read every one of the 1,000 alerts that come through 24/7. It's going to triage for you. We still need human in the loop. We still need this. But it is, like I would describe it as a true cyber arms race. And in this case, there's a chance that we'll get those defensive tools at least at the same time as the bad guys get their hands on them.
Yeah, which is kind of fascinating. With all this talk about AI implementations, AI adoption projects, what happens to resilience?
So that, to me, is the overlooked piece. In our race to get this stuff implemented, I think we're forgetting as an industry. I haven't heard too much about it compared to the amount of talk on how great AI is. Like we talk about the risks. We acknowledge the risks, and we talk about the benefits. But actually getting into the risks is something where I do think we need to look at a lot more.
Yeah.
And again, not scare tactics, but like very simply, AI fails differently than normal IT. If the online website stops working, you can't log in. It's obvious. But what happens if the AI fails by slowly making poorer decisions? That doesn't get noticed. That flows through the entire business life cycle of whatever's dependent there. What happens, and I think the really obvious question is, say the AI does fail and it's obvious. Either we eventually catch it silently failing. Now with proper checks and balances, you can catch it. But you still come to a point similar to like a traditional IT system where you go, the computer's gone, what do I do? And in a way, at the moment, like traditional business continuity, you've got your business continuity plan, you've got your key process, key people, your facilities, and you have your workarounds. So the way I am starting to think about it, actually based on a discussion I had with somebody yesterday in the US, was we should think of AI the same way as we think of a key person risk. So if the key person in this important process, maybe it's an insurance claim, maybe it's who decides if a cancer screening report is correct or not. If that key person disappeared, what would we do? Is there someone else who can step in that has the knowledge? Have we written down what's happened or what needs to be done? And those type of things. So I think those are the type of things we need to start looking at. And you might be saying, okay, well, what is our fallback? Leaving aside how do we detect that it's slowly going off track. But if it's as successful as we want it to be, in 3 years' time, 5 years' time, maybe the doctor reviewing the scan results is AI, but doing it for 3 years, who could step in if we decide that there's a problem? Not just like I think in more simple things, if an AI is categorizing insurance claims, you say, okay, well, yeah, we can document how to categorize them and we can fall back. But if you start losing expertise.
Yeah.
Actually, I had a good question raised by a colleague in Munich who said, we won't need junior developers. Like, we'll only need senior ones. But what happens when the senior ones hopefully grow old and retire? How do we get new senior developers if you don't start as junior developers? Yes, it'll be a very different job, but you still need people to start, and the junior developers will come equipped with AI, and they'll be very different, but they do need to grow into those senior roles where they can oversee and supervise the AI. Yeah. So I think there is those type of questions that go around.
Yeah, I think the organization structure in general is kind of antiquated, and it just needs to start to be updated, because if you even think about the different job descriptions people are doing, we know AI can be woven into so many of those tasks. So I don't necessarily see AI is going to do all these jobs and roles, but certainly it can do tasks within the job descriptions that then you augment and you start to reimagine what that looks like. So that's a big progress change.
Yeah, and look, the advantage here is we know there's a vast amount more work to do. Like, there's very few people are sitting there that I've got spare time.
Yeah.
So it's how can we use this to do more, to cover more tasks? We use things, we had a great example, our head of resilience had on a Saturday, however many weeks ago, where we needed to figure out which flights passed through the Middle East. And the data we had was not telling us that, but we had flight numbers and you could look it up, and like 3 minutes later, there's an agent that can automatically do it all, and 5 minutes later, we say, well, these are the people we need to talk to say, you're not coming back via the Middle East. You're going to have to reroute your flight. You're going to have to figure this out. So there's a lot of, I suppose, adoption at specific, we call it like use case level, piece by piece. But it's how do we step back now and look at an entire business resilience team or an information security team and say, in the future, say we have 10 people now, but in the future we have twice as much work to do. Do we still have 10 people, but we've got 100 agents? So how do you fundamentally rethink what you're doing and build it in? But step by step, because I think there's a lot of people who it's still a dark black box and they're going, AI is going to take over. So that's where I really encourage is go, have you used it to do your grocery shopping? Have you used it to ask questions? I use it to figure out how to schedule hockey matches. That's where I started with it. It's like, wow, this is brilliant. So I think having that certain level of AI literacy is so important.
Yeah, but I totally agree with you. It's all about the personal usage of it. And then you build confidence and thinking, actually, this is quite good. And then suddenly everything becomes a nail and you're actually just leaning into it from a kind of a business perspective as well. Sam Collins, Head of Security and Resilience at Allianz Global Investors. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.